What's up guys? Welcome back to Ride JBI. I'm JB. This is going to be a follow-up video. We did one a while ago that went into detail about the differences in compression adjusters on KYB, Showa, and WP rear shocks. Even though we have two different adjusters here, the key takeaway is look at our high-speed adjuster. It's got 6 holes on the outside. What else is that very similar to? Well, that looks a lot like KYB high-speed piston, and it looks a lot like Showa high-speed piston. Since that video, we have released our JBI DIY shock kits for the Showa shocks that you find on Kawasaki and Honda motorcycles. And in that meantime, we've been very busy testing and developing some more JBI titanium WP Pro Shock compression adjuster pistons for our WP shocks. Building upon what we discussed in that first video, we're now going to focus specifically on the WP shocks and the new piston that we came out with, and what drove us to develop this piston, what it is also similar to, so that way you can kind of reference and understand what we're doing, why we are doing it, and most importantly, what you should expect as a rider if you put these settings in your shock. So to the left of me, I have a few different WP shocks laid out. I have the new 2023 WP linkage shock that has been on the linkage bikes since 2023. And then I have the previous generation, let's say 2016 to 2022 WP linkage shock. And then to the very left of me is the new 2024 WP Explorer Pro shock. The reason I have this here is what's cool is we can see the assembly of their adjusters. Before that, their adjusters always had the same exact diameter in terms of the low speed and the high speed. As you can see now, if they have shrunken down the diameter of the low speed clicker quite a bit. And then we'll put up some images of the shocks that WP has been using on their pro racing side and what they're not selling to us in the public yet. You will see some similarities in terms of how this one is laid out and what they're using up on the race team, and then what we are doing to these OEM shocks, so that way we can utilize in our OEM shocks hardware designs that we already know work well in other shocks. So to get right into it, what's really cool about this new shock is their high-speed adjuster. That is this item right here. So again, on the previous version, now this is the linkage model, but even on the PDS models, they still had the adjusters the same diameter. Again, low speed here, low speed here. You can see it's been shrunken down a lot. It still has the same adjustment effect, meaning low speed controls bleed by, meaning it allows the oil to go around the shims and the valving instead of through it. I think WP realized they don't need an adjuster as big just for that simple function. Now on these older shocks, this adjuster was also the check valve or backflow for the oil during the rebound stroke. So the low speed had two functionalities. It did compression and it also did rebound. We could only adjust the compression side of it. That's the low speed. What WP has since done is they have simplified the function of the low speed adjuster to only adjust low speed compression, and that adjuster no longer is the backfill for the oil on the rebound stroke. Instead, they have implemented that feature into the high speed. We see the H here and the H here. So now the high speed adjuster, which has shims on it and our high speed plate and spring, just like the older style does, it now has a built-in check valve. We can see that because we have this spring right here that'll lift up out of the way. And then these would be the feeder ports for the rebound stroke. And these 6 holes that kind of look like a revolver are the feed ports on the compression stroke. So that's what WP's been working on their pro side of things. And again, we can buy this style of shock in their Explorer PDS, but not when it comes to their linkage XACT Pro shocks. They still have the adjusters being the same size. So we'll jump over to our OEM shocks that we have here. Now, depending on what shock you have, you might be used to seeing this style of adjuster on the outside. That is out of our 16 to 22 shock. Or you may be familiar with this style of adjuster, which has the hand adjusters, and that's from our 2023 and current shock. Now, this is what the piston looks like on the back side of our adjuster here. You can see that is quite a departure from what the kit piston looks like. So the kit piston has 6 holes on the outside, that really spreads out the pressure that we're putting on these shims and allows these shims to deflect open quite easily compared to these 3 small intake ports that this one has. So what we did at Ride JBI is we redesigned this piston to look like this gold one right here that you see. So you can see the commonality on the intake. Again, these 6 holes are going to allow oil to flow this way through the adjuster, and so will these 6 holes, allowing oil to flow through. Now, we tend to think of shock absorbers and shocks and valving as a lot of oil flowing through it, and that does happen. But what we are really manipulating is pressure. And by changing the geometry, meaning the design of this piston and how that puts pressure on the shims that's on the back side of it, since we have more holes and it's more spread out, we have a lot more surface area, and these shims do not have to deflect open as far to allow the same amount of oil to flow through as you would if we're utilizing this piston right here. Now again, if you go back to our older videos, it's a little easier to see the 3 ports here that feeds through for it. If you go back to our older video, you can see what the Showa and KYB shocks look like. They also have a similar piston that looks like this. So what I'm getting at is only WP and their OEM shocks feature this style of piston, and only that. All other brand motorcycles that utilize KYB or Showa, and whether it's OEM or kit, they utilize a piston that has this design in it. And WP started using that design in their kit shocks a few years ago. And again, we see it taking place here again. What we are seeing happen is they're going to marry these 2 adjusters back into this dual adjuster layout. We'll put up an image of another shock that we've seen a few times on Chase Sexton's bike that seems to be their, let's say, most up-to-date kit shock or work shock that WP has. And again, that's not available to the public yet. If you look close, you'll see that adjuster looks very similar to this adjuster on the outside. It just has different finger adjusters on it on the outside. They have cool aluminum ones that are very low profile instead of these plastic ones that stick out a lot. So to continue what we're building upon, now on the back side of this shock, we replace this piston with our JBI piston. Now I've already mounted it up here, so that way we can get a nice back-to-back, side-to-side comparison. And then another thing we did is we have this high-speed spring. When you adjust your high-speed adjuster here, we're dictating how much this spring gets compressed or preloaded. Now, that spring sits on what we call the high-speed spring plate. The diameter of this plate is going to sit on the widest diameter of shims right here. So it's helping assist the shims that are closest to our piston. So what I'm getting at is our high-speed adjuster and the spring, when it pushes down on the shims, it's very active. It contributes a lot. If we look at the Showa adjusters, high-speed plates, we'll see that those ones do not push on the shims directly against the piston. They are a few millimeters further back. To be specific, this pushes on the 22 millimeter shims in OD. This pushes on the 19 millimeter shims, so a little farther away. We have found through testing and rider feedback that riders tend to prefer this style of high-speed plate because then the high-speed adjuster isn't contributing as much. Because in our opinion, we have found that these contribute too much compression damping is at the expense of the responsiveness and the plushness of the shock absorber. So what we have is a Showa kit style high-speed plate and a Showa kit style inspired titanium piston. You can buy DIY kits, which we will provide you with these, and you assemble it up this way, and you can fit it with the original housing here. And what's awesome is this cage right here is going to line up perfectly with covering up our check plate. Because right here, the way that these refill the shocks is this has a shim that deflects down. And it creates a lot of area very quickly for it to backfill. But we also need to support it. So what's perfect is with these, make sure we put this on there. This edge is going to cover that and assist it. Perfect. So this would be your new assembly for your JBI Titanium WP Pro shock, fit in just like this. And now for these new shocks, they do not feature any built-in cage like this. So you can see on this one, we have the black cage right here. And that cage is doing what this one is doing. I'm going to pull this off just for demonstrations, but you'll see that this cage is going to fit right over and line up with that to cover it. So that way we can utilize this style of piston on the new 23 shock. The compression adjusters work exactly as they normally would. So does the high speed. But now we have a JBI Titanium WP Pro Shock compression adjuster mounted up to this 2023 WP Shock compression adjuster assembly. So again, I like to reference things. Here's the newest style that WP is providing to the public, only in the WP Explorer Pro Shock, but we're seeing it being used on the Pro side of things on their linkage shocks. So just logically, we can kind of deduct that if we have a very similar piston with similar geometries and how much area is being applied to the shims, we can logically deduce that these shocks will probably work pretty similar to the kit shocks that are out there. And that's exactly what we have found. In terms of the older generation kit shocks that are out there, we've done some back-to-back testing, and we have found that our new JBI Pro Shock settings are working very, very similar in terms of performance and at a fraction of the price. So what you'll be seeing from us is we're going to be offering DIY kits for WP shocks and also JBI suspension revalve services, which we've always offered, but this will be our newest spec that we have to offer today. And these are going to be the slightly different variations that we're offering dependent upon what shock that you have. So our DIY kits and revalve services and what this piston will fit into is going to be all WP linkage shocks from 2016 to current 2025. Then also all WP PDS shocks from 2017 to 2025 as well. And that also includes the WP Explorer shocks on the KTM HUSQVARNA and HUSQVARNA TC85 bikes. This also fits in there, and what do you know? You get very good similar results as well. Just to touch on a few more things, this OEM 23 shock already features many of the same hardware and components as the WP kit shock. By that I mean they have the same shock shaft diameter, so they're both pushing the same amount of oil through the compression adjuster. They both have the same shock shaft main piston. So those are two key elements that have a huge influence over how the shock works. As you can see, we put our JBI bladder kit on this shock, so that makes it equal to the WP kit shock that also uses the bladder. And then the last piece of the puzzle that we were lacking was we were still using the OEM WP piston and getting good results, but not results as good as the kit shocks that we were also testing and developing at that time. And that's what led us down this route, was we were looking at those shocks back to back and going, man, you have these very similar in all other areas, but this is the one area we have not seeked out. So about a year ago, we started working on developing our own pistons for these, and we came out with a couple of different designs, different sizes, and did some rough testing. And now a year later, all that's been concluded. We've gotten some really good results that we're excited to share with you guys and get some more feedback now from the public that these will now be released. I'm sure you guys got a host of questions for us, so please leave us below in the comments. We'll be happy to share with you in any more detail, any questions you have about this setup and how it works. On ridejbi.com, we will have JBI product pages for not only the JBI WP shock revalves that we offer, and we'll go into detail about these products as well. We'll also have DIY pages too. And I think we're gonna make our own specific product pages for these compression pistons. We're not gonna sell these individually, but we'll just have a product page up there. So that way there's a separate page where you can really geek out and nerd out on all the details about those pistons, about how they work. And most importantly, you can see what we're doing and being transparent and upfront with you guys about what we're doing, why we're doing it, and again, most importantly, what you should expect as a rider if you do choose to decide to try these settings on your own bike. Thank you for watching. All JBI suspension services and parts can be found at ridejbi.com.